Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. So today I want to talk about how I would begin a brand new dividend portfolio with just $500. Because I noticed when talking to friends and family trying to get them to start investing that the major hurdle they have is thinking that, I only have a couple $100 and it's not going to make any difference whether I start investing now or later. But I'm sure that all of you guys watching this understand that starting to invest is super important, right? Just getting the snowball, the compounding machine going as early as possible is a primary goal. Now, with that said, there still are different ways you can go about investing depending on your capital. And to put it simply, here are a few objectives I would focus on. The first is having a small number of positions while still being well diversified. So essentially what this means is to stick to a few high quality ETFs. It's still going to give you all the diversification you need, but you're not going to have 20 different individual holdings. Now, I know a lot of you guys are going to disagree with me in the comments because ultimately there's really no difference between holding an ETF and high quality stocks that make up an ETF. But the difference really comes down to your psychology and the motivation behind it. So let's do some basic math. If you have $500 and you invest it all into VYM, which has a dividend yield of 2.36%, that's a yearly income of $11. And VYM pays on a quarterly basis, so you're going to get roughly $2.60 every 3 months. But if you take that same $500 and you split it between 20 individual stocks, even if each of them has an average of a 2.5% dividend yield, that's only going to be 63 cents from each stock per year. So due to that reason, I would avoid starting with a portfolio like this. Even though these are all great, very high quality companies, AbbVie, Broadcom, Home Depot, Johnson & Johnson, these are the best companies in the world, I still would avoid an approach like this when starting with a small amount of capital, simply because of the motivation and the extremely small dividend payments you will receive if you take this approach. Now, one advantage of this approach is that even though the individual dividend payments are minute, you're going to be getting them more often than having one ETF that pays out 4 times a year. So getting back to my principles here, that's why my next point is you might want to focus on ETFs that have monthly dividends, and that's mostly for the motivation as well as the slight enhancement to the compounding process if you take those monthly dividends and reinvest them. And my final main objective here to follow is to focus on total return first and income second. Yes, we love dividends, they're very important. Establishing a second stream of passive income, it's an awesome thing, but this is investing and the total return is still the number one most important thing, because it's bad investing to, say, select a stock or ETF that pays out a 10% dividend yield, but the value of the asset is going down 10% per year. That's not helping you in any way. So with that background in mind, I want to show you guys a few sample portfolios I made on how I would approach starting a brand new dividend-focused portfolio with a small amount of capital. Okay, so the first one is the simple split. I've talked about this before on the channel, but it's consisting of just 2 positions, a dividend ETF and a growth ETF. We can see the 2 names I have here are SCHD and SCHG. One is dividends, one is growth. And of course, in terms of the target allocation, you can adjust this to be whatever you want. So if you want more dividends, up the target exposure for SCHD, and the inverse if you want more growth. And with the current 50-50 split, the combined dividend yield is only 1.67%, but the pros here are the extreme simplicity as well as the great diversification these 2 ETFs give you in combination. So the simple split is one of my favorite portfolios, and I recommend it to people all the time. But say you like the approach of the vast diversification, but you want a bit more focus on dividends. Well, for you, I have this portfolio. So here we have 50% allocated to VTI, which is the total US stock market. And then we have 25% dedicated to dividend growth and another 25% dedicated to dividend aristocrats. So we can see the idea behind this. VTI covers all the bases in terms of diversification, but then you want more of a skew towards dividend stocks, and that's granted to you through dividend growth via DGRO and aristocrats through Noble. Now, of course, all the individual stocks held within these 2 funds are also within VTI. The point is to give you more exposure and weight to these kinds of companies while still being fully diversified. Really, the 2 drawbacks here is that the overall dividend yield is still pretty low at 1.7%, and you don't get dividend payments all that often. So in terms of motivation, this isn't that great. Both of these funds pay out on a quarterly basis. And to try and address this, my next portfolio here is extremely simple, 2 holdings, and it's JEPI and VUG. JEPI, of course, is a value, very high yielding ETF. It's conservative. And VUG is the complete opposite. It's growth and high risk. But the benefit of using JEPI here is that it gives you monthly dividend payments and the yield is extremely high. And that's why the overall dividend yield is 4.22% and you receive that every single month. Now, I should note that historically, funds that use covered calls to boost income tend to slightly underperform in terms of growth. That's the trade-off. But again, that's why we're pairing this with VUG, a dedicated equity growth ETF. And I gotta say, overall, I really do love this combination. You get monthly dividend payments, the dividend payment is very meaningful, and the overall performance is great. Okay, now to finish off the video, this is my top simple portfolio. And if I was to start a brand new portfolio today with $500, this is exactly how I personally would go about doing it. Again, we have just two holdings and it's extremely simple. The S&P 500 and an S&P 500 covered call fund. So to start, the S&P 500 is a phenomenal ETF. It's the 500 largest companies in the US weighted by market cap. It gives you great exposure to both growth companies as well as high-yielding dividend companies. In fact, if I come back to the simple split, this is really just taking the S&P 500 and splitting it between the dividend half and the growth half. And as mentioned, that does have its own advantages because you can set the targeted allocation for each group. But in this configuration, I have it split up so I can't change the exact split up between value and growth stocks. Rather, I can control the exact yield and income of the S&P 500. And that, of course, is done by combining it with XYLD, which sells covered calls on the S&P 500. So this fund is a pure income play off of the S&P 500 and does not give you direct exposure to the equity and price appreciation of the index. So by combining them, this half is giving me exposure to the equities and the growth of the overall US stock market, and this half is driving income off of it, which is then being reinvested back into these funds. I do have to admit that during good bull markets, XYLD will underperform because it's not going to appreciate along with the equities. But during more rocky and uncertain times of the market, like so far in 2022, the consistent monthly income can really help to be a reliable source of income that helps to boost the returns over time. So there you have it, guys. That is how I would go about starting a brand new dividend portfolio with a small amount of capital. Here are my main principles. I would avoid having 1,000 different positions because the individual dividend payments would be extremely low and not very motivational. So for that reason, I like ETFs with monthly dividend payments, and of course, always focus on total return first and income generation second. That's gonna do it for the video. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did and you're still watching, I appreciate a like on the video. Go ahead and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.